be okay. I need to get rid of that. There are no guests here today. Alright. Welcome back everyone to Saito Streams. Today we're gonna do what we've always been doing and continuing work on Project Wand, which is our little magic school side project thingy. And today I just kind of want to finish off this thing I'm doing first, which is yesterday's gal that we drew with the prosthetic legs. I just want to finish off this particular drawing before going into other stuff, namely more like writing idea brainstorming type stuff. So just doing the colors on her now. Hey Penmaker, Wolf, Kyle Perkins, Justin, Road to Dawn, Lettuce is here too. Yeah, Lettuce, there's some modicum of an idea where to take it, but so hopefully I flesh it out a bit more on stream. Setting down the layers first, and then metal, like hey Zenith Astral. So what's going on here? The initial idea behind this was kind of like a RWBY / magic school type idea, where of course it's still like an original setting, but with the characters and like the ideas very strongly based on RWBY. However, as some of the characters are sort of coming more into their own, they are definitely not perfect one-to-one copies of RWBY characters, nor are they really meant to be like copies, but it's more like if you're a RWBY fan, hopefully then there's like some similarities that you would like about it. And this is stuff that I've sort of touched on in like the really first VOD that I talked about this concept, which is how like you see like certain ships or characters in like other anime or games that kind of remind you of RWBY, but then it's like not, but it kind of does. So like where there's certain characters or certain tropes that they use. So in this case, it's a case of me trying to do so intentionally. Right now we are doing the one of the planned main characters, who I guess is the closest to the closest to the Yang parallel, I guess. Just kind of tomboyish and sporty and blonde so far from what the colors have been showing me. But not, of course not like 100%, but it has kind of a Yang-ish vibe, I would say. Yeah, but everything else is meant to be kind of original, so like even the magic system, the setting, the lore should also be fairly original, because it's still meant to be its own thing. Let's see, so from here, let's grab this. Hair. Get the colors done real quick. Is this going to be like your RWBY content? So I guess what you mean by that is whether there's gonna be like video stuff on it and such. I'm not sure yet. This is still mostly kind of an experiment for me, because kind of why I started this and why I'm streaming in the first place is to have like something fun to work on in between videos, because the next RWBY Remnants episode is still being done. We've just finished like recording like a lot of the audio, because it's like voice clips for like 4 characters that we needed to like coordinate with the voice actors for, and like a lot of lines basically, and we're still not yet at the editing stage for it, but all the art for the next part and the voices are done, but we're just kind of waiting on all the proper voice lines so that we can jump straight into actually editing it together. But it should hopefully be within the near future, after which I can then start work on the next part. Let's see, let's fill these parts out first. Glad to hear you're gonna make a new magic system that isn't Harry Potter or RWBY's magic system. Yeah, well, yeah, it's definitely gonna be original in its own sense, as in I'm gonna try to make something from scratch. Although, cause there's some parts of just from thinking about the setting itself and what kind of ideas it could explore, there's a lot of ways can be taken beyond, you know, just fully copying like Harry Potter RWBY, because we want to be obviously based on these other properties, so it will be a little bit derivative, because obviously there's no like fully original ideas nowadays, but we wanna be creative about it, which is why, you know, we have exploring all the things like how wands are used, how wands have evolved over the years, until to the point that like even this character like implements it into like their own prosthetics and stuff like that. So that's kind of the idea of like this sort of wizarding society that has evolved to like a more modern age, and how their magic and their weapons have sort of evolved to match that progress. Hey, Mother Joker, you're here. Welcome to the stream. I already told you we casted Neo, so I can't help you there, buddy. And I do mean that we do like have a legit voice actor for Neo who does like, you know, stuff like the grunts and the little small vocal stuff that Neo does. And that was actually casted quite a long time ago, but obviously because Neo is not meant to appear for quite a while, it will be some time before she appears. Hey Wolf, working on RWBY weapons. Yes, so fixing RWBY has just concluded its volume 6 run, so I'm guessing there's a lot of work they're doing to begin work for volume 7, though I guess it's still early, so I need to do a hair highlights. Should have been you, Joker. Well, Devil artists didn't exist back then, so our paths did not cross as they should have. Should I give her... yeah, that's just fine. Colors are still not entirely final, but I do like her general vibe. I think maybe her eye color could be different. Once again, we drift towards the worst timeline. I mean, yeah, if we're given everything right now, it's definitely not one of the best, not one of the better ones. Actually, I'm kind of thinking of matching her eye color to her hair. But then she needs like contrast in like other areas, perhaps. I'll think about it. Hoodie. Because her main color is yellow, but don't necessarily want to be like too yang either. Green, because I need to keep in mind what the other characters' color combinations might be. Although this is just like a casual outfit artwork, so she can wear other colors. It's fine. Yeah, this should be okay. Next is to just do a quick shade of her skin. Should be done pretty quickly. Suddenly reveal that without any foreshadowing that their wands can do DBZ style beams that summon the ghosts of the heroine's parents. Well, Well, that's what we're gonna figure out today, aren't we? What they can or can't do with the magic. Just the shade. Seems nice. Miss that pink hoodie. Well, we'll workshop it. Pink is a good default color for this sort of thing. Also considering giving her like piercings and stuff. But maybe as we flesh out more, I'll figure that out. So just have that kind of delinquent gal vibe. Where is the... Okay. Soft. Do a slight blush on her. Okay. Next, the eyes. Leaning too much towards orange. I think there might be another character that could use orange, so we'll leave it. Let's do this maybe. Then the overlay layer, do yellow. I wonder if people who use metal prosthetics feel differently about getting metal piercings. Like, hey, it's just one more piece of metal to add to my body, not a big deal. Well, I'm obviously wouldn't have to actually like consult an actual person with prosthetics to get a sense for that, but you know, a lot of people have prosthetics not really out of choice, obviously, because of like, you know, accidents or any other thing that causes them to get it. So of course once they get it, they will have to learn to live with it, and kind of it's, you know, becomes part of their new identity. But I don't necessarily think that they might view piercings as the same way, because it's not necessarily like a cyberpunk situation where people are just fine with augmenting their bodies as much as they like. Yeah, this wizard society, I don't think it's at that technological level yet. I need to add the highlights. Is the magic going to be elemental? That's what we're going to figure out later, once I finish this. I have a few ideas about what to do, but we'll have to see. Just add a quick shade to the hoodie and I think we'll be done here. Okay, multiply layer. Excuse me. All right. Just do a quick pass. Oh, see you later, Joker. Thanks for coming. Yeah, so yeah, her legs are prosthetic. That's sort of what we've explored in this last thing we did on stream. So like she has these kind of prosthetic legs, and then there's this retractable wand that comes out, so it can sort of go back into the leg and out. And you know, when she does stuff like kicks and all that, she can cast spells using it. That's all the idea behind this character's thing. So right now, just want to do kind of a more casual wear version of her before moving on. Just the shades of this. We turn off the multiply. Maybe if I bump up the brightness in this. That's fine. Just do a quick shade of prosthetics. probably add a more like detailed pattern to this, but just to her prosthetics, because some folks were suggesting stuff like some cool ideas, like maybe she sticks like these sort of like magical stickers on like her prosthetics and all that, like decorating it, but then these stickers can be used to almost like magic runes. So there's a lot of ways to explore it there. I think nearly done here. Okay, I will probably post this right after. Seems okay. Hey Floof, welcome back to the stream. It's probably too much space here, but just move all this to the side. Actually, I'll just add a bit more shading since we're here. Brush pass, knee. Like shrine maidens you see in the anime with their paper charm. Yeah, it's like those talisman things that people use in anime that like they use for like seals and runes, but giving it like a modern twist, so having them be like stickers, kind of like what you see Miles Morales uses in Into the Spider-Verse. That's also a cool idea, but we'll need to figure that out as we go, because we kind of need to figure out the main power system for this, and I cannot find. Okay, that is right. I need to add some highlights to her hair. I have one question. Are there floofs? Well, I really don't know, Floof, whether they are like foxes or not. Oh, but there are like familiars. Cause we did like a typing stream 2 days ago, and in that one, one of the main characters, she had like a cat familiar, so it is possible that other animals like foxes and stuff would exist here. Cause I like the idea, because you know, like in Harry Potter, everyone likes the idea of having like an owl that like delivers your meal, that kind of thing. But I've always wondered why it isn't like why there aren't like more choices per se. So like if you wanted, you could have like a raven or bat or frog or whatever somehow magically deliver your mail that you will keep in your dorm. So I did like that idea. So keeping it around for this also works. To overlay this. Shading. I think we're pretty much done here. That should do it. Okay. Save this real quick. Right. Post on Twitter. Give me a sec. Let me drag it in. Yeah, I'll just name it that. I do think her name is June. That's the name I've kind of settled on. Just share it real quick. Let's see here. 1665570. All right. Let's see here. Okay, so now we can focus on what we came here to do. Let me just open up a new canvas. to 160 to 480 by to 480. Alright. Let's see. I love how you approach drawing the hair so simple yet implies so much more detail. Yeah, the hair highlights add a lot actually. Otherwise, it can end up looking kind of flat, but just adding like the highlight layer on like certain parts of the hair give it a lot more detail and definition. I don't know what you have established with the magic system, but could you also go with the Zero no Tsukaima route and say that's a ritual they make where it's a magical familiar summon? Yeah, a lot of ideas here, and that's kind of what we're getting into today. So there were a few ideas I had cooking for the magic system, and there's a few ideas I'm tossing around, but I guess to sort of preface things, so I've done, so kind of what I want to accomplish is I'm thinking of maybe the idea of like something similar to like a shonen manga type battle system, so kind of like wizards but as like a shonen manga, so something close to like what you would expect in like Naruto with like the ninjutsu, Bleach with like the bankais and stuff, Jujutsu Kaisen, so something that has like that kind of system, which means that each character has kind of like their own unique power within that system. I know that Black Clover is one manga that actually, well, Black Clover and Fairy Tail were both around the idea of wizards or sorcerers. I've not done a huge amount of research into both of them, even though Black Clover seems promising, but from what I've seen, at least it seemed quite like general. So like the wizards in that world, they each had like their own thing. So there was like one of them who could do water magic, and one of them who could do like metal magic and time magic and stuff like that, and each of them kind of had their own thing basically. And then of course there's the main character Asta, and Asta, he's like the anti-magic guy, and that's his main gimmick, is that he doesn't have magic per se, but he has like this sword curse thing that is like that can like nullify other forms of magic. That was sort of the main thing in that one. And that's kind of like the approach I want to take, with just sort of like laying down kind of what are the possible rules, as well as the potential for how like the character designs might end up. Let's see. Jujutsu Kaisen's power system sounds up your alley. I could answer any questions about that if you have any. You could M3D. From what I understand about Jujutsu Kaisen, there is like these curses and stuff. I know like each of them have like their own thing. So I know like Nobara has like these kind of voodoo doll kind of stuff that she uses with nails. More of what I want to find out at this current moment is sort of how like how these things are learned, right? So because we have like, so normally we know like in this sort of like shonen anime, there's like these folks who have like a specific power, and we're kind of left. The question I want to answer is like, is it that they only know that power, or can they like learn more? So for like, if you take something like My Hero Academia, for instance, they have quirks, and you're kind of like born with that quirk, right? So like, if you're like this stretchy dude, you can only like stretch. Kirishima, he has like the diamond skin thing, and your powers can evolve within that gimmick, but you can't really like learn anything else. So Kirishima, he can't like learn something like Bakugo's quirk, which is like the explosion stuff, unless you're someone who has like a quirk to copy other people's quirks, but that's like a different thing. So, and actually RWBY semblances are the same way, where you're kind of born with it, and when you awaken your aura, you may get a semblance, which is like this basically like a quirk that you're born with, and that's one type. So let's actually write this down. So one type is basically inborn powers, right? And two is learned powers. So this is stuff like My Hero Academia, this is stuff like RWBY, and then we have like Harry Potter, Hogwarts, where obviously the magic system is knowledge based. It's something that you learn, so you learn the spells and all that kind of stuff, and that obviously means that if you wanted to, you could learn multiple different abilities at once. And actually, from what I understand, Naruto is also like this. So Naruto, it has like, hold on, that's not the right color. Naruto has like the jutsus, and the jutsus are basically like different forms of ninja arts that they learn. So like the substitution jutsu, the clones, I guess even like the Rasengan and all that, and even like, so there are like characters that have like their own thing. So Shikamaru, he's like has the shadow magic, shadow jutsu, and Kankuro is like the puppet guy, he controls puppets, and Shino, he's like the bug dude, he like controls swarms of bugs. But from what I understand, it's something that they had to learn. It's not like they were born with that power. They had to learn how to do it because their specific village specializes in that type of ninjutsu. So it's kind of like they had to learn it, but it's because of like their culture or whatever that they sort of specialize into that form of power. And of course, there are some. Naruto is actually a mix of both, because Naruto also has powers that you are born with, like the Sharingan, and basically all like the eye powers, so like even like the Byakugan stuff. So there are some ways to sort of mix the two actually. So Jujutsu Kaisen, oh hi Leda, welcome to the stream. So Jujutsu Kaisen is like My Hero in that their specific techniques are 100% hereditary. Abilities are unique to the person and possibly their bloodline. Okay, so so that's actually not what I thought it would be actually. So actually JJK has inborn abilities, because that sort of thing also will kind of bleed into like different stuff like themes, obviously. So like even let's say Avatar: The Last Airbender also has like inborn powers, and usually a lot of these stories about inborn powers, they always explore issues about like talent, right? Like, or even stuff like classism, like the people who are born with powers, they get like all the power and prestige, but really it's because of the family they were born under, or just pure luck that they have these powers. So like so My Hero was about this, how Deku sort of had to struggle with the fact that he was born without a quirk compared to everyone else. Avatar kind of explored this with the Equalists in Legend of Korra. I wish they explored it more, but you know, with like Amon and the Equalists, how the non-benders had like this sort of resentment towards the benders. And what I liked about Avatar, and this was something that we discussed, that I discussed with a few others in like a Discord server, the idea that even though benders were very powerful in the Avatar world, there were actually a lot of different ways that non-benders could combat benders. So you had stuff like chi blocking, which is like a martial art that you could use to target certain pressure points to disable someone's bending. So it's like sort of like blocking your mana flow basically, right? Or your chi. And obviously they had stuff like actual combat prowess. So there were like people like Mai and I guess even Sokka, where they had combat abilities, and Suki as well, who had combat abilities with weapons and fighting and martial arts that could actually keep up with the bender. And technology was the other thing. Technology was rapidly expanding, and this was sort of how the Fire Nation got so powerful as well, is because they used technology to sort of replicate the same effects as bending, and eventually, you know, even like wipe out the other bending nations. So that's also a very interesting point, that that there is like a power, there's a disparity between the magic class and the non-magic class, but the non-magic class also had tools and people who knew how to be on the same level. And that could be interesting, because then in the power system you could have a variety of characters who knew how to use magic, but then some who had to use other means to kind of fight. And what was the thought I had? But yeah, that's one approach you could do, the inborn powers thing. Yeah, so in Naruto they were born into clans that invented secret techniques that could only teach to people in that clan. Yeah, so it's kind of a mix actually with Naruto, where yeah, technically you could learn it, but it's such like a closely guarded secret within the clans that you pretty much had to be born into it. That could be a good compromise between the two, which means that anyone could learn it if they wanted to, but it's sort of like kept secret. And that's actually a decent theme to go with like a magic school type setting, because obviously the idea of magic is that, and especially for like wizards in general, the idea of like, you know, the Harry Potter style wizards is that they gain their knowledge, gain their magic through knowledge and spells and stuff like that, which through like studying scrolls and books, of learning from other mages. But if the idea is that a lot of like the really powerful mage families sort of held a monopoly over certain types of magic, so like if only this family knew how to control this form of magic, then obviously it could be learned, but they don't want to share it, and that obviously creates like a social disparity in the world. And that could be like some potential for characters there, where some characters maybe they learned it without being in that family, which obviously makes them like a controversial figure. There's another approach we can take. So let me actually write all that down. So for the approaches, so there's some ways to go. So the inborn magic thing, let me actually just type it out instead of write. So born, so what's the one? Okay, so inborn magic. The right color for this. Alright, pure and born magic. And that leaves luck or family based, and that will make people without magic still had tools to fight. So this is stuff like weapons, technology, and I guess combat, martial arts. Let's make this smaller, 20. And then we had another option, which is this is, I guess, secret magic guarded by certain bloodlines, clans or bloodlines. Can be learned, but is monopolized. So there's some slight, in a sense, the power dynamic is kind of the same. Actually, it's sort of very similar, but I guess like the origin is somewhat different, because then that means like whether the main character can sort of like learn these other forms of magic, or are they just born with it? Let's see. So a lot of you guys are mentioning Bleach, so like tell me more about it, like, because I know Bleach has like the Bankai, and Bleach is sort of like only focused around like the Shinigami, right? And like hollows. So like the Shinigami, they had like basically like a weapon, a Bankai that they can sort of summon and use at will. And that one, they had it had like different forms, like the weapon could evolve over time as they grew more powerful, something like that. That is one way, but it is quite specific to the setting. Something like that would actually work quite well with a kind of RWBY-esque setting, because obviously RWBY has a lot of focus on like weapons in general. So if like something has like RWBY but around the idea of magic weapons, right? So we know RWBY has kind of the focus is more on tech-based weapons, where you invent the weapons and make them. But if it's more like a RWBY had a more fantasy type leaning to it, then instead of making your own weapon, you sort of have to, the weapon is like magical in nature, and as you use it more, it sort of evolves with you. So it could work with a RWBY type setting. So the way magic is treated in the Nasuverse, where the families study different styles of magic but keep the knowledge to themselves. Yeah, from what I understand. So the Nasuverse is like Fate, Fate Stay Night, Fate Zero, that kind of stuff. The Fate type of magic is definitely more along your traditional mage families who like kind of control the world and guard their secrets closely, because even the entire idea of Fate, which you know is about like these 7 historical figures fighting each other, if you don't know the magic system for that one, but each one of them is summoned by a mage who then tells them what to do. They give them orders. So if you know, like, like Shiro and Saber, Saber is the servant, that's what they're called. and Shiro's the master. He is like the guy who summoned Saber, and then they fight each other basically. And the mages there are normally like the most, typically not always, are like the most powerful people, and they have like and they are like all fighting in secret basically. This is how like they conduct their wars pretty much, through these wars involving the servants. And the mages in Fate could do a lot of shit basically. I mean, there's no set system. I believe they could like do fire. There's this guy who could summon like liquid mercury. There's like a lot of different shit you could do. So I don't think there was necessarily like a pattern to how you could learn magic. If you knew it, you just like, if that family knew it, you probably knew it. Something like each, without it being specific. Their abilities are pretty much the physical manifestations of their souls. Yeah, it is kind of RWBY friendly in that regard. It's almost like combining the idea of a weapon and a semblance together in Bleach, because the Bankai is sort of like your weapon and also kind of your superpower. So if you were considering about making like a very RWBY-ish action thing, then the idea of like, you know, like a Bleach type Bankai system would definitely work for you, because it's sort of like combining the idea of the semblance and the weapon into the same thing. However, this one is already kind of going to more of a magic route, so it's a cool idea, but maybe not one that might fit this one, simply because the wands here are not necessarily unique. Like the way that the characters here use their wands. So let me just pull up a bunch of the characters here as examples. Let me just pull up some of the characters as examples. So the characters here, they use like wands and stuff, and how they use wands differs between people. So it's like an individual thing, where some like this girl, she implements it into a prosthetics, another uses like more of a traditional wand, but also like a wand sword thing. But those weapons are not unique to them basically. It can be crafted, you can make more of them, they can break. That's sort of the idea I had. But the idea is like a wizard society that has, you know, evolved over the years, and how their weapons have evolved in that time. So I do know that there is like a grim type monster race in this setting. So there is like a bunch of monsters that they have to fight in this setting, which I have not designed yet, but they are basically like the Grimm. So obviously because of that, there is like a sort of arms race between the Grimm and the wizards here, that they have to develop new ways of fighting with magic. So not just learning new spells of magic in like a mental sense, but they also have to hone themselves physically to be able to fight physically, and that evolved into the way that they use wands and stuff like that in combat. So you can sort of imagine that like the traditional you can sort of imagine the history of it like this, right? So these monsters, they invade, they attack people, and then the first wizards are born. And the first wizards were basically like what you would expect in like Harry Potter or Dungeons and Dragons, you know, the very squishy mage archetype, where they just have like this staff or this wand that they use to cast spells from far away, but if the thing gets to you, then you're obviously dead because you're not good in like close quarters. And obviously, as a result, a lot of wizards died because they couldn't defend themselves. So over the years, the wizards obviously saw a need to have a better way to fight the monsters using magic. They can't just shoot spells from afar, which is why over time, obviously, they began to implement actual combat techniques into magic. So even like casting magic is like a part of their combat. So with this one, it's like there's like a wand sword, which is like used to like cast spells while swinging a sword to slash things. And then obviously this girl is kind of more like a Mercury from RWBY kind of thing, where she uses like martial arts and kicks to channel magic. So it's sort of like over time, magic in this world evolved into something that you could mix in with actual physical techniques. And then it became a point where the stereotype of a wizard in this world is not a squishy old guy or a vulnerable type of person, but the idea of a wizard in this setting is someone who has peak mental performance to cast the spells and peak physical performance in order to fight. So the idea of a wizard is very different in this setting than you would expect for what you would typically expect for like a wizard. So let's see. Also, wands are kind of the general term for magical foci that are used to manipulate magic in this universe. Kind of, yes. That's close to something that I want to touch on soon, but let me go to some of the comments first. So how high can the wizard scale up? That's kind of debatable. I think leaving the power scaling kind of vague gives us some room to play around with it, because I'm not the type to be too concerned with like accurate power scaling, as long as it sort of generally follows the rules that it sets out. And obviously some rules can be broken, but you know, I'm not too like anal about that kind of thing. This talk makes it all the more funny how Jujutsu Kaisen is. They are 100% sorcerers, but surprisingly often they just start throwing hands and they're super good at it. Yeah, I've seen some of the fight scenes where like this one dude just gets bodied by like two of them. They keep punching him back and forth. Yeah, so there's definitely some like martial arts in there, and I do know like one of them, Maki, which is like the girl of the glasses. I think she has like this spear that she uses. I don't know what her actual powers are. And then her sister, I believe she has a sister, and her sister just uses a gun. Like she shoots people, and I don't even know what her powers is, but she has like a gun that she tries to shoot Nobara with. But yeah, there was so now I can actually get into what I wanted to explain, which were some of the draft ideas I had for the magic system. So let me see if I can pull up the doc I had. I did write down the ideas, so maybe I can pull it up on my thing. Okay, so there are currently two variants of the magic system that I want to look at, and let me just stream my browser real quick. Alright, so here I have my Google Docs up. I think it should be zoomed in enough. So there's two main ideas I want to cover, and and I want to sort of flesh them out or choose one of them from here, which is, so there is the idea of so what I came across is there is the idea of and this is covering one of the magic systems, right? There's the idea of the static magic system and the dynamic magic system. And one example of this is in RWBY, where RWBY has dust and it has like aura, and aura includes stuff like semblances, right? And we don't talk about magic in RWBY. That's like that we're not going to talk about that. But the idea that RWBY actually has two magic systems, which is dust and it has semblances, right? And dust is a static magic system, so it has like the different crystals and the elements you can use. So if you're not familiar with RWBY, it has fire dust, which basically is like a fire crystal, and an ice crystal, and a wind crystal, and you can't really do much with them. You can you can obviously, they're a resource, so you can use them in like ammunition, in bullets, you can use them as explosives, you can use them as fuel, stuff like that. But they're kind of like unchanging, right? They're just rocks. So dust counts as like a static magic system in RWBY's world. But then you have semblances, which is a dynamic magic system in this world, which means that it can evolve. It's unique to the person holding it, and it's more individualized. It can change. So what I like about RWBY is it has these two different types of magic that sort of complement each other. And so that's kind of what I thought about for this one, which is one of the ideas, which is the fact that, so there was this idea that had that there is this thing called the weave. This is a placeholder name, but there's the thing called a weave, the weave, which is basically like, you can think of it like the internet of magic, which is just basically like this big cloud of knowledge where all magical lore is stored. And whenever you cast a spell using a wand or whatever, you are sort of taking information from the weave to cast it, right? So imagine like Googling. You go on like Google and you Google how to cast a fireball, and then it tells you how to cast a fireball. But it's like more, it's more like your wand and then the words you say. So it's like, like how Harry Potter does it. You say Wingardium Leviosa and you make things float. You say Incendio and you make a little fire thing. And in those words that you say, the incantation is like the code of the spell. So when you say Incendio, it means that someone long ago figured out how to cast fire as a spell long ago, and then they sort of uploaded that knowledge into the weave, or rather when they found out how to do it, it was sort of absorbed into the weave, and using the word Incendio, they sort of coded it into the weave so that anyone who uses the word Incendio can cast a fire spell, right? And that's the static magic system. So it means that anyone can use it regardless of ability and all that, and you just had to know like the code to it, which is like the words. And then the dynamic aspect of it is the sorceries or the workings, which is basically like your actual inborn talent, right? So each mage in this world can use the weave, and the weave is just there. You can use it to cast very basic spells, so like your basic fire or ice spell, but every individual wizard has their own unique inclination towards a certain type of magic. So let's say when you're born, when you're born and you try to use Incendio, it's just like normal. But when you try to cast an ice spell, your teachers and whoever's observing you, they notice that your ice spells are more powerful than average. And you learn ice spells much more effectively. You're just better with it, and that's sort of your inborn inclination towards that type of magic. So whenever a wizard is born or goes to magic school, they test you to see which type of magic you have an inclination to, so that when you train to become a wizard, they have you focus on those known spells, like so. And obviously that means that especially early on, in like the very early days of magic, the first wizards who had like this sort of inclination towards certain magic, some of them obviously they would have an affinity towards an entirely different undiscovered type of magic. So imagine that back at the time you had fire wizards and ice wizards, and let's say those were all the wizards that were there. But then you had one guy who was born who had like this strange talent to understand lightning, and then he performed the first lightning spell, right? And when he learned the first lightning spell, and he gave it like a name, like whatever, electro or whatever you want to call it, he coded it into the weave, so that now he invented lightning magic, but now everyone who knows the code can cast lightning magic. And I mean, that's kind of how the internet works, right? The internet, you add more knowledge into it, and then more people have access to it, so it gets more and more valuable the more knowledge it stores. And over time, obviously hundreds and hundreds of spells have been added into the weave that a lot of people know, and nowadays it's becoming more and more rare for an entirely new type of magic to be discovered. A lot of times it's just like a variation of the same spell, or something like that. So obviously an idea for like a main character is someone who has a talent for like a completely new form of magic, and that's like a very rare thing nowadays, because magic is already almost like kind of learned, a lot of it's already learned to its full extent, and that's kind of the idea behind this one variation of the magic system. Would the setting be in modern times? Kind of, yeah, since it's kind of following like a RWBY type thing, it is going to be like fairly modern. I mean, obviously there's like prosthetics and stuff, and there's like a smartphone equivalent in that world. It was in like the writing stream 2 days ago, but there's like this kind of device that you can open up like a RWBY scroll, and it could show you text and stuff. So it is very closely resembling our modern age. Yeah, so that's the explanation for magic system variant number 1, which is the weave. And let me switch to that so I can type it out. So with the weave, okay, so to quickly explain the weave, it's like the internet of magic, where you can upload spells into it using like code, or basically like incantations basically. And then if you have like a wand, if you have a wand, your wand is basically like, it's like your device, right? It's like your PC, it's like your mobile phone. Using that, your phone or whatever, you can access the internet and gain knowledge from it. So your wand is sort of kind of like your focus in that regard, in that you need to know the code, the words to you need to know the spell to cast it, but then you need the wand itself to channel the spell itself. And more knowledge. But then obviously there are people born with inclinations toward existing or new forms of magic. And this is Magic System 1 that we're looking at. Okay, so keep that in mind. And now I'm gonna explain Magic System 2, which I will switch to real quick. Right after this bathroom break, which I'm gonna switch real quick to the winning screen, and see you in a bit. Okay, so now we're gonna dive into Variant Magic System 2, and the text on screen is a bit complicated to read because you know, these are my notes, and my notes are incomprehensible to anyone but myself. But so the idea, let me just explain to you so you don't have to read. So the idea is, we know that there's like the wizards and there's the Grim, right? And the Grim, well, the Grim are like the monsters, right? So what I liked about RWBY is that it had that monster race, and how it kind of has like this sort of this dualistic relationship with the hunters, because the hunters, they hunt the Grim, and then the Grim, they sort of evolve to adapt to the hunters to like kill them and stuff like that. And I was kind of like that idea, which sort of, and we know like in RWBY, the Grim like completely dissolve when they die. They just like evaporate into smoke. For like my AU and stuff would be remnants, and just like as a general headcanon, I would change it so that the Grim do evaporate, but they leave like the bones behind, right? So stuff like their skulls, their teeth, basically anything that is supposed to be solid bone gets left behind when they die. And because there's just like a lot more interesting stuff you could do with that kind of part of the setting, because when obviously there's kind of like maybe like a Monster Hunter flavor to it, you know, where you kill the monster and then you take its body parts, and maybe you can like use the body parts in like to make weapons and stuff like that. And I always liked that idea, So that led me to, yeah, like armor, or like even like decorating yourself, cause like I'll show you like cause like even on my channel, with like RWBY Remnants, there's like the Weiss video, this one, where we see it right at the start, we see Weiss's dad, and he's leading like this group of soldiers with some mission to kill some Grimm, and they leave like a bunch of bones behind. And even with him himself, he's wearing like a bunch of Grimm bones as like trophies on his, you know, his garments and stuff like that. And it has what I like about it is it has, you know, a lot of the monsters have a lot of cultural significance in the world, and that could also lean into stuff like the magic system and stuff like that, like the weapons. So that's something I've, as you can see, I've explored before in RWBY, and something that I've wanted to explore here as well. So let me see. So okay, so the idea here is that, and this has more to do with like lore and backstory. So imagine long ago that there were like these gods, right, or these creatures. We don't really know what they were, but they were like these really powerful beings that walked the earth, and then they all suddenly died, right? They all mysteriously died in some kind of war or something that it was way too long ago for anyone to remember, and all that was left were their bones. And their bones have magic in them. That's the only kind of remaining power left in these creatures. So then, obviously, people started taking these bones to use in like magical rituals, and these bones are what wizards use as their wands. So if you obviously, if you've seen, like, there is a reason why I colored the wands this certain way, is because they were meant to be made of like bone. So all these wands are the same color. They're not made of wood or any other material. They're only made of this monster bone thing, which can be used to channel magic. So this wand is made of bone. This sword is kind of made of bone as well. Even like the little talisman things that she hangs around herself are made out of this monster bone. And of course, for like this character as well, the spike coming out of her boot is also a piece of bone. And that's kind of like the idea behind this one, is that these magical bones from these fallen creatures or gods or whatever were harvested and used for magic. But then eventually the bones and skeletons themselves are able to take form and create monsters, so like the Grimm basically. So for whatever reason, which I've not worked out yet, for whatever reason these bones can sometimes almost like have a will of their own, and like they can like gather together and form like a skeleton, and these skeletons form into like monsters and stuff. So which then obviously the wizards will have to go and fight them and kill them, so that, you know, they don't kill people. So but then it leaves them in this constant conflict, because these bones are indestructible. They cannot be destroyed in any way. not even using magic. So the idea is the fact that the wizards and the monsters are constantly at war with each other, because every time obviously every time like a monster dies, they can like take the bones and use that as magic. But then every time, you know, a wizard dies or they lose their wand or for whatever the reason, monsters form, and it's just basically these bones keep changing hands and getting recycled over and over, either becoming a monster or becoming wands for the wizards to use. And that's kind of like the idea behind that particular magic system, because so I mean that's sort of like the main gist of that. So if I were to write it down and summarize it here, it's that god bones basically. So the magic comes from bones of long dead gods, and they can be used. Bones can be used as wands by wizards, but then the bones can also form into skeleton monsters, right? And then so it's basically like an eternal cycle of the bones changing hands between wizards and monsters. So they both have different vibes to them, because obviously the vibe behind this one is more, I guess, a bit more, what's the word I'm trying to find for it. It has like a more primal vibe to it, the vibe of like hunter and hunted, because like there's just this idea of like there's this like cycle of predation between the wizards and the monsters, that they constantly have to kill each other. That's something that I always found interesting in RWBY, because of like there's this constant war between the hunters and the grim. So it kind of almost has like a more dark fantasy feel to it. So something you might expect from like, I guess, like God Eater or Bloodborne, stuff like that. It has that kind of more dark fantasy, kind of post-apocalyptic vibe to it. Whereas this one has a different vibe, because it has a more like modern vibe, and it's more about magic as like a form of knowledge, I guess. Because obviously like the weave is obviously like a parallel to the internet itself. Like how you use the weave is basically like a metaphor for using the internet, and it has like more like modern parallels to it, with like using codes and spells. It's more like of like a traditionally wizard-like theme to it, with like the spells and the wands. And this one has more of like a more of a visceral theme to it, because it has like it involves like bones and skeletons and stuff like that. So they both are cool in kind of their own way. So that's why I've been trying to sort of think of either which one to use, or whether there's like a way for me to sort of combine the two together. Also, is there, let's see, the bones accumulate residual magic energy over time, which allows them, yeah, so I was thinking I was thinking one of the ways that the monsters form is maybe from like a wizard dying. So I think in Bleach, when people die, they become like hollows or something, right? If they have like some sort of thing that binds them to something that they're angry about, or revenge, the vengeful spirits, then they become hollows. So maybe it could be something like that, where if a wizard dies, they might end up becoming like a monster, or just like the magical energy gets like coalesces into something. Also, is there like a giant site for god bones, like the Keyblade graveyard? I don't know the Keyblade graveyard, but what I actually came to mind was God of War. And God of War had like I didn't really play it yet, but I knew that God of War had like this one location where you can see like a bunch of dead giants all like scattered around the mountains, and that really gave me like a strong image of like skeletons and stuff strewn around like basically like a desolate wasteland. So it definitely has a more like post-apocalyptic feel to it. Let me see. And also like the idea of, but yeah, basically it's like that. So I am sort of thinking between these two. There is probably a way to combine the two, obviously, because you have like the god bones, which is like, you know, the stuff that you harvest for magic and stuff. But obviously the weave can also exist in this world, because you know it could, because you know in the same way that the internet is a relatively new invention. It was like invented in like the 80s, basically late 80s or mid 80s. The weave could have also been, well, not super recent, but you know, invented within a certain time frame, where before this maybe people used the bones to like cast magic and stuff, but they didn't really have a way to retain the knowledge of spells beyond teaching each other, or like through oral tradition, scrolls, stuff like that, until someone invented the weave, which allowed which basically like propelled the technology level forward. It's sort of like, I guess the invention of the weave would have been like the industrial revolution, simply because all the knowledge that now can be retained and used by anyone gave the wizards a huge advantage against the monsters, which then allowed civilization to flourish more and more forms of technology to advance, that kind of thing. Let's see. Over time, as you keep using the wands, the wrath of the dead gods start acting up and you start getting cursed. That's also interesting. Because why I like the weave is because, you know, it's like, it's very kind of a self-contained system, is easy to understand. But why I like number 2 is because it has a lot of plot potential, because you're already setting up a mystery as to who were the dead gods. You know, why do the monsters form from this? Where do the monsters come from? There is an inherent mystery to this premise that allows for obviously certain plots to arise, and people start investigating what's really going on and the history behind magic. So I do like it simply because from the magic system itself, you already kind of have an idea of what kind of story can be written around it. yeah, so the god bones could be in some desolate wasteland that was very clearly a war zone, and there are thousands, if millions of bones. Yeah, so I don't know if it's like all over the world or if it's just like in a certain area. I mean, I was thinking it was probably worldwide, since these creatures or gods or whatever were probably like all over the world back then. But the idea, I also would need to work out what are the rules for, I guess, like the monsters forming, because if a wizard took a bone, like basically the question is, what is stopping the wizards from eventually winning if they just like eventually just harvested every single bone in the world and like keeping it in like a vault or something, right? If they took all the bones and kept it in like some underground chamber and then the rest were given to wizards to use, then what's stopping them from like actually winning the war, right? Because and I guess technically that could still be possible, simply because there are so many bones out there that it may be impossible to like collect all of them, and they are trying to collect all of them. So maybe that is like their end game plan, which is to slowly collect all these bones. But then obviously you would have things like villains and conspiracies that maybe try to like side with the monsters and like try to like steal bones away, that kind of thing. So there's sort of like a back and forth going on. Yeah, it could be specific areas. It could be specific areas, but obviously, given the fact that they keep getting harvested and monsters keep forming from the bones, obviously they would be scattered quite a fair bit around the world. On the curse thing, you could have it so that the bones try to pull you into forbidden knowledge. Glad you mentioned that, Wolf, because let me see if I can find what I want to find, which is first, right? There is a cutscene that I want to, that inspired me a bit, that I want to talk about. But I need to know how to find it. Okay, so alright. So like, yeah, so the raw sorrow of the gods is what creates monsters. So this is really interesting because this is kind of close to the kind of ideas I want to have with this, which is, so recently, or rather like a few months back, I played Honkai Star Rail, which is like a MiHoYo game, and the idea behind that, and even in like Genshin Impact had like a war between the gods, the Archon War, and which I also found that was a very interesting idea in that setting, because basically the Archons in Genshin were like these 7 gods who created the nations, and they are the gods they are now because they had to fight wars with other gods and kill them in order to become those gods. And one of the locations, I think, was like the Guyun Stone Forest in Liyue in Genshin. It was like an area full of these stone pillars, but those stone pillars were actually like spears thrown by one of the Archons, the Geo, the Earth God, into the earth, and that's how those pillars were formed. And I always loved the idea of like there was this war or battle or disaster that happened to the gods, but you can still see like the traces of those around, which is what gave me the idea of like the skeletons and corpses lying around on the earth. So in Honkai Star Rail, there is a similar idea where they have, instead of Archons, these are called the Aeons, and the Aeons are basically like the space gods, because this is in space, where I think they are also kind of like fighting each other, because we know in one of the missions, one of the gods is enemies with another god, which is Lan the Hunt, which is like a hunter god, is enemies with what's the name? The abundance. Basically, it's like a healer god. So those two were in constant battle with each other, and the hunter god is constantly trying to look for and destroy the creations of the abundance god, which is like a god of like life and growth. And that was like a really cool idea. And what I liked was also in this cutscene. We'll just watch it for a bit, and it's insanely loud for some reason. And oh god, that is not good audio. Hang on. What the hell is that? Let me lower that. Damn. Okay, that's better. Alright, so there's this part where the main character dies, basically, and then they have this vision. So in this cutscene, the protagonist guy goes to protect one of the characters, and this is one of the Aeons, right? So what happened here is they died, kind of, and when they died, they had this vision that they met one of the Aeons, which is, this one is the Aeon of Destruction, Nanook. And because of this, they kind of like awakened to their powers and gained like part of the blessing from this Aeon of Destruction. And eventually later on in like one of the other plot parts where they also almost died, and they had like a vision of another god, which is the Aeon of Preservation, Clippos, and then they gained like a new set of powers from that god as well. So there was this idea that, of course, in the case of Honkai and Genshin, these gods were still alive. So obviously in this case they were still alive, but for this one, if they were all dead, I like the idea that somehow they could still communicate with the people who use them. Maybe pardon my neighbor's dog. Let it out of steam. Yeah, but the idea that maybe when you were using them, you can sort of like look into their memories, or they could like, or their bodies were destroyed but their souls were still living. That's why there was still magic within their bones, because their essence and will was still alive within those pieces. And that was sort of what will kind of clue you into the plot, because like obviously there was this big war between the gods long ago, and then they all died until only their bones were left, and their souls inhabited these bones, and when wizards used them, they could gain like visions and stuff from these gods. Yeah, and that idea could set up a lot of plot stuff, like, you know, did maybe each character could communicate to a certain god, or if they could hear them at all, and they could maybe get an idea of what happened in the past, what caused the war. Did, like, you know, are some of the gods evil, were some of them good? Maybe it's like one of the evil gods that is sort of like making the monsters by like trying to like reform their bodies, stuff like that. So there's a lot of plot potential there. Let me check for the comments. So yeah, the bones could be lost or forbidden knowledge. Not all bad, but using more powerful bones can lead to exposure from things that humanity should not know, leading people to being driven mad, transform. Yeah. If I boil soup with a magic bone and drink it, will you gain the magic power, turn the grind bone into a powder? Well, I think the bones are indestructible, so you can't probably do that. Yeah, their bodies may be decaying, but their will never dies. I think that could be the ticket here to this particular system. So the idea that their bodies are destroyed, but their wills and their souls exist, and some of them are probably good and want to help humanity. Some are neutral, like they accepted their death and just want to move on, and they're sick of people using their powers or whatever. And some may be actually actively hostile and destructive, and that could be the cause of the monsters. Is some of these evil gods are trying to like impose their will to try to like revive themselves, and that like causes the monsters to appear, because like and that could lead to stuff like cults and stuff like that, where these cults are maybe trying to revive the gods, so they're trying to like collect all these bones and form them together. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. If the bones are indestructible, how could they make weapons? Good question. So if they were, I would say that, I mean, I think the initial idea was that I think part of the idea is that obviously I would have to change parts of the designs to make it fit, but part of me is thinking maybe like some of the bones are already in that shape, so obviously maybe like more complex forms like this, like the moons and this one shape, may need to be edited if that's the case. But for something like this, like I can definitely see this as maybe like part of a rib or like an arm bone or something, if it was, you know, shaped a bit more organically. So if you literally cannot destroy them, then you kind of have to just take it in its existing shape and use it as a weapon. So which is why most wizards would opt to using smaller bones, because they're just easier to handle, and those become like the ones. Obviously, like, you know, this one has a very simple shape. This could easily be like a tooth or something, like a fang or claw, and that's just like a one that they can use. So yeah, that's, if they're indestructible, then you kind of just have to take them as is and use their forms, and I kind of have to like design the wands around that idea. If they were destructible though, like if you can carve them and stuff, that would have a few story implications, because then, you know, if you can destroy them, then, you know, that adds a lot of different issues into the pile. Like if you can destroy them, you know, that's like the ethics of, should you destroy them, you know, so that these evil gods don't come back, or should you keep them so that you can, you know, have, you know, more power to fight back. If you can destroy them, that means, you know, wands can break and stuff like that. So for simplicity's sake, I'd rather just assume that they're indestructible, and you have to like and maybe these ones were already in that shape when they were found, because they're like magic gods, right? So they don't necessarily have to have accurate bone anatomy. Let's see. Yeah, it would limit the shapes that ones can take, but then again, these are like magical beings, so again, they don't have to conform to like natural anatomy, because like a lot of them, we could sort of stretch the definition of what a bone could be, or just like what is left behind when a god dies. Maybe if it's a snake god, it might have left behind a skeleton, but it might also have left behind stuff like scales, and scales obviously have like a very unique shape. Even for like, let's say this character, she has like these moon-shaped talismans on her. Those could have been scales that dropped off one of like a snake god or something like that. That's like one example. So we can sort of stretch the definition of what could be left behind when a god dies, because it's magic. We can sort of do whatever feels the coolest and more creative. Or you can break the bone or turn it to dust, but it will always eventually reform, especially if other bones of the same type are nearby. That could also work. That is possible, because then that means that wizards could like shape the bones into certain forms, but then there's this sort of expectation that you have to take care of your wand. It's like your most prized possession, because if you lose it, bad stuff can happen. It can like get absorbed into another skeleton. It can be stolen. I mean, that is a possibility. So, but that's kind of getting into like the minutia of it, the specifics. So we kind of want to dial back to like the general idea. So, because we know that, so you want to zoom back up. What if the god's bones are indestructible but monster bones aren't? Well, the idea here is that the monsters are formed from those bones. So like excuse me, so like if you have like a skeleton, and then whatever magic shit happens, sometimes that skeleton can reform. It's like a dinosaur fossil, right? Sometimes you don't have all the bones together, but enough of them can like form into the shape of a dinosaur, so that will like take the form of a monster. So it's composed from those same bones, but then of course when you kill it, it disappears, and then all the bones become like normal bones again, and then you can sort of harvest them. That was sort of the main idea. But if these monsters are just like magically generated, then obviously we don't have to worry about that explanation anymore. But what I wanted to do was sort of zoom back out to this magic system, because so I guess it is possible for the weave to also be implemented into this, because if this form of magic is more chaotic, the bones magic system, because obviously there's like, it kind of depends on like maybe like because what I was considering is whether the type of magic you could cast depended on the bone you were holding. So like if you were holding like let's say one of Thor's bones, right? So like the bone of Thor, and that bone that you use as a wand can cast lightning magic, because that's what Thor does. If that's the case, then obviously it'll be tied to that specific wand, and the weave allows it so that you can probably cast lightning magic using any kind of bone. That could offer some more flexibility there. I do like the idea that specific like God's bones have different powers based on what God it was, and like that sort of gives like an identity, so it allows you to identify whose bones was which, or that's Thor's bone because it has lightning magic, or that's like a bone of some other elemental god, and that's how that magic came from there. It sounds cool, but it also can be limiting because then obviously it had to depend. It's more of like the magic then will come from the equipment itself and not necessarily from yourself, because then it sort of conflicts with Magic System 1 where you have like an innate talent towards a magic, and that's sort of how magic is added into the weave. So we have to workshop it a bit if we want to get both of them to sort of coexist together. But why I wanted to sort of zoom out is to sort of consider how it will work in like, so like I'm sort of picturing myself writing like if like this is like a Shonen Jump comic, right? It's like a Naruto, Black Clover, Bleach kind of deal. How would I picture this magic system in action? So that means obviously this means what sort of, obviously this would mean give me a sec. This would mean what sort of powers there would be, and what sorts of characters you can make. So obviously it's also a very visual medium, and we want to figure out like if it's like a shonen battle system, what kind of characters can you make from it, like how much of a diverse set of powers can you gain from this sort of thing. Yeah, let it done. Okay, so we want to figure out like the different types of characters we can make from it. We can think god damn it, so I can't think anymore. So like so in shonen terms, what we see normally in like a shonen battle manga is each character has like one thing, right? So even RWBY has this. Most shonen type settings have this thing where one character knows one thing, and this could be because of so obviously we have like ways to explain this, and this could be because of their innate inclination towards their magic, or it could be because of whatever bone that you're using, right? So it's a question of whether the person's quirk, their unique superpower, is it because they have like a specific inclination towards a type of magic, or is it because they prefer to use like a certain god's bones, and in which case it could have like a certain relationship aspect to it, like maybe like that particular god chose them, sort of like a persona type thing, where they chose them, so it gave it their blessing to use their magic because it like the character sort of aligns to their personality or beliefs. That could also work. That could work because like we do want like a decent variety of character types that we can use. So and I don't think, well, let me see, because like if you're following like more of a Harry Potter kind of deal, then Harry Potter obviously you can learn any type of magic. So even like in the movies or the books themselves, we see like a character like Hermione, for example, because use a large variety of spells. So like she has like a light spells, you can use it to repair stuff, you can use it to do telekinesis, you can use it to do a variety of stuff. And I think that is maybe the weave aspect of the magic system, where you can learn a lot of different mini spells through the weave and conjure it that way. So you can use it to, like, you know, do some basic telekinesis or fire, but it's never really like super powerful, right? These spells are something that anyone can use, but they're not super powerful. They require an incantation, they have certain limitations to them. But if you have, you know, your specific superpower type thing that's like, you know, for that particular character, then that's like your main thing, right? So in theory we have like a fire mage, fire wizard dude, who mostly does like fire magic. They would still be able to cast, you know, basic other spells like ice or telekinesis or whatever if they wanted to, based on their personality. If it's like, you know, a hot-headed guy who only focuses on fire magic, then he obviously would not find any use in like using the weave. So different characters would have different levels of how much it actually would use the weave in their magic. So if we have like a Hermione type character who is like a very nerdy, smarty pants type character, they would use the weave a lot because they would know a lot of different spells for different situations, for like moving stuff or ice. Basically they know a spell for every occasion, but they may not be very strong in their specific superpower thing. It's a bit like Weiss, because Weiss, she knows about a lot of like it's not quite like Weiss, because like Weiss, her semblance is like, you know, the glyphs and stuff. It's more like Weiss in summoning, right? Because like at volume 3, like early on, she didn't really know summoning, but then she knew like all these other stuff, like different types of glyphs and dust attacks and stuff like that. So it's kind of like this type of character, it's like that kind of character. And then someone like a Yang type character would only know, like, really know fire magic, but then she doesn't really know all like the other weird spells and dust and that kind of thing. And then Blake is maybe somewhere in the middle, that kind of thing. Yeah, so you can have them have both elemental affinities and a personal affinity, I guess so. There could be an aspect of blood magic, since blood comes from the bone marrow and marrow is more flexible. So to gain more magic, people will have to drink blood from that god's bones, like Vampire the Masquerade. Possibly, but that would mean obviously that the bones are destructible if you can break them and drink from them. So that's obviously a question you have to solve. But again, that's like additional stuff that we don't want to think about right now. We're just sort of looking at the main aspect of the magic system, which is kind of, from what I can understand so far. So what I can understand so far is like these two can coexist within the same sphere, and they have this thing where you have like the bones of the gods, and then you have the weave, which is kind of like people who have somehow learned the magic over time, and then encoded that knowledge into the weave so that anyone can cast the same magic. But then everyone will have a certain affinity to a certain type of magic. And given that it's like a magic school kind of thing, obviously that means there's like some sort of formal government, right? Formal government based on magic. So like, you know, the Ministry of Magic or whatever you want to call it. And I think that would be what assigns people their wands, because, you know, when you're tested, you get tested for what your magical affinity is, and once this Ministry of Magic knows what kind of magic you specialize in, they will probably go through their vault of different bones that they have, and they would authorize you, assign you like one of the bones into your possession as that, you know, that you have an affinity with. So if you have an affinity towards lightning magic from your testing, then the ministry will look at you and say, okay, we have this, so you have an affinity towards lightning magic, we're going to give you the thumb bone of Thor, or whatever, you know, like, or the 16th molar of Thor, or whatever you want to call it. So, and that will be like part of your magical focus. And the story of why this character has kind of so many of them is because she is from, the idea was that she's from like a noble family of mages, of wizards. So obviously, if your family is more influential, that gives you more access to more bones, which you can use to, I guess, amplify your magic and stuff like that, or just give you more tools to work with, or as like a prestige thing. So even there's like a social aspect to like having multiple boards at once. But most people will only have one or two, because obviously they need to have enough of them going around. So characters like this would be an exception to that rule. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm gonna take another bathroom break to sort of let it all absorb. So we're gonna take another quick break, and we might end stream soon, because unless we come across more ideas. But I'm gonna take a quick break first. Back. Another possibility I was thinking about was that it could be an affinity thing, but it also could be that sometimes, because we sort of established that these gods are still alive. Their bodies have been destroyed. So it could be that in a lot of cases of why people become wizards in the first place, it could simply be that the gods, these dead gods, are observing the world, and so they're kind of like having this weird shadow wall like above us or under us, in basically like in an unobservable sense, trying to exercise control over the physical world, and they're like observing people who have the potential to carry out their will, right? So in a lot of cases there would be gods who see one person and they think, I want this person, and that's like, and eventually I guess through like the Ministry of Magic they somehow learn this sort of thing. They find out about this, and that's what grants people their affinity towards a certain type of power, because it's like a power pertaining to that god. So if like the soul saw someone, like, you know, like let's say Nora, he saw like a Nora character and say, yeah, that's the one, I want this little gremlin right here, and then he gives her his blessing, and that means she has an affinity towards Thor's power, and then when she becomes a wizard, so you become a wizard when you become blessed by such a being, and then, you know, when she joins a magic school or whatever, the ministry finds out, she and Thor are tight, you know, he's sliding into her DMs, and then they give her, okay, this is your wand, this is a piece of Thor's rib or whatever, and you can use this to cast lightning magic, that kind of thing. It may or may not need to be dependent on what bone you get, honestly, because if you already have like the blessing from the god, it may not necessarily need to matter what bone you're using. Maybe just generally all the bones can just channel magic, but it's dependent on which god gives his blessing towards you. So like the paths in Stariel, because I actually am taking quite a lot of inspiration from Stariel, because I kind of like how it lays out its path system. So if you don't know, there's like classes in Stariel, and in Stariel that's like the path of destruction, and each path is overseen by a certain god, right? So the path of destruction is presided by the god of destruction, or the Aeon of destruction, and in the game it's just very like a gameplay thing. It's just to determine your class. It doesn't really like determine much of your personality or powers, or generally, you know, you have your playstyle is sort of like that, you know. So the path of abundance, which is the healing growth god, lets you do more healing abilities. It lets you heal people. The path of preservation, which is the god of, you know, the god Klipoth, that is towards characters who give shields, who are very defensive in nature. And like there's the path of erudition, and erudition is like the magic god, I guess. And the path of erudition is just basically like big area of effect type spells, magic, basically like, you know, hits a lot of people, very magical in nature. But it didn't really, it had an element system, but it wasn't really like your path didn't determine your element in that sense. So it more determined like your playstyle, but it can, obviously we can sort of work around it here. So obviously obviously, like if we're gonna take like certain shonen characters as reference. Thanks for joining the stream, Penmaker. See you. But yeah, the path in Star Rail in lore act more like philosophies. Yeah, it's kind of like a religion you follow, I guess, because there's a lot of characters who follow a certain path. But here we're thinking about, you know, shonen manga terms. So if we had like obviously like a character like, let's say, Shikamaru, and Shikamaru is the shadow guy. He can use shadow magic to control people's shadows and stuff like that. So in this setting, based on what we discussed, it will mean that he would have gained the attention of one of the gods out there, whose entire theme is like shadows and darkness. So let's say Nyx or Erebus, you know, one of the gods or goddesses of darkness or night, and they give Shikamaru their blessing, and that's why he's able to use shadow magic. Or with Shino is the bug guy. He can summon swarms of bugs, and that's because he's been scouted by, you know, a god associated with insects. So let's say like Beelzebub, the Lord of Flies, or a plague god of some sort that gave its blessing to Shino, and that's why Shino can control bugs and shit. So that's, I can sort of see how easy it is to make characters in this setting, because, you know, we don't know how many actual gods are there. So it could be hundreds of them, it could be 10. We probably know like the most famous ones, which are probably the ones that all the main characters are going to use, and those are like the main, I guess, most powerful or well-known gods. And what I liked as well, it is very similar to Chainsaw Man, because I also really liked Chainsaw Man's system, because in Chainsaw Man there were devils, and the devils are like the equivalent of the gods here. And the devils, they have varying levels of power. It was based on fear, so, you know, if more people feared fire, then the fire devil would be very powerful. But not a lot of people are scared of cucumbers, so the cucumber devil is very weak. That was how that system worked out. But you get powers for making contracts with the devils, right? So Aki, he had a contract. He had two contracts actually. He had a contract with the Fox Devil, which is when he does the con thing, where he can summon a giant fox to eat people. And he had a contract with the Curse Devil, which was in his sword. His sword could like kill people instantly or something like that. It was a cursed sword basically. So I liked the idea that you got the powers because, you know, you had like a certain pact you made with a certain otherworldly being. And, you know, being a when I played Dungeons and Dragons, I was playing Warlock a lot. I'm like a Warlock main. So, and Warlock is like a type of mage that makes contracts with other beings. I always like that kind of aesthetic. Yeah, so like this, the idea that, so it is, I guess, technically possible for multiple gods to have to turn their attention towards the same person. And obviously that seems like a very protagonist thing, where they gain more and more attention from certain gods who try to each give them their power, and then they might end up fighting over it. Then there's sort of interesting things you can do there. I have an idea for the gods, which is the major arcanas. So funny thing, I did consider that. I did write it down somewhere. Not here, but I did write it in a place where maybe like they would group certain gods under like, obviously they will like classify them using a certain system. So in the tarot arcana, you obviously have like the emperor, the hermit, the hanged man, and then you will sort of maybe group certain gods within those classifications. So that's, I was actually thinking about that. So like, so if you know like the emperor arcana, you would have gods that are associated with like kings. So like Odin is one of them. So Odin would be like an emperor type god. So that could be and then you know like goddesses associated with, let's say, the empress. So the empress is like, you know, goddesses like Hera or you know, Ishtar, those types of gods maybe. And then the fool could be associated with trickster gods, so like Loki and fox spirits, you know, those kind of deities. And then you obviously have like the death arcana, you have the devil arcana. So I have indeed considered that as a way to classify these gods together, so that, you know, the wizards will obviously, if they have like a lot of these gods running around, they needed a way to keep track of them. So maybe a classification system like this would work. It would be cool. Yeah, like persona classifications, because obviously I'm a big Persona fan as well. So that's always been an interesting idea to me, of like mythology and all that. So yeah. So I think we're sort of getting an idea of how this will go about. So if I know that, then I can probably work out what certain characters would be, like what god would they have an affinity with, and then which determines like their magic, that sort of thing, which I can do after stream, because I kind of need time to think about who's who. But I do know for this character at least, for this girl, I think hers is Hecate. Hecate is, I believe, the goddess of magic and of the moon. I think that could be someone else, but I think, you know, generally Hecate is associated with these symbols. So her god is like Hecate, and she is very focused on using the weave. So she knows like a lot of different spells. So she's sort of like an all-rounder, right? She's sort of very versatile, knows a lot of spells, and that's why her patron, the goddess Hecate, the goddess of magic, works well with her, because, you know, it allows her to use a lot of different spells very effectively. And then for, I think, this girl, either this girl or someone else, but one of them basically, like, if she uses like a lot of fire, then I want the god that she has an affinity with either be Prometheus or Surtur, because Prometheus is, you know, is the Greek god that stole fire from Olympus and then gave it to humans, and then Surtur is the fire giant from Norse mythology. So it's either one of those two. And obviously that could be interesting, because that would mean if two characters have fire magic belonging to two different fire gods, that could be interesting, because they might have a rivalry with each other. So that's clearly like a cool thing that we can explore with like different characters having the same powers but coming from different gods. So they might have different applications of philosophies regarding it. And then one of them also, I do want one of them, probably the main character actually. The main character's god, I want them to be Nemesis, and Nemesis is the goddess of retribution and vengeance. So for that goddess, she doesn't like have a clear theme, right? She's not like shadow or fire or water necessarily, but why I say Nemesis is because she has, number one, she's like one of my, probably my favorite Greek mythological figure. I just like her, the idea and theme behind her, and she has a cool name, so I just like her the most. And two is because I think that's probably like a plot reason for it, which I won't super get into, but the idea that Nemesis is sort of this character who seeks vengeance, who seeks retribution, and like for like past wrongs or sins, and they chose this character to be like their avatar, basically, right? Basically to be a person who carries out her will to punish evildoers, and I think that's like there's a lot of story potential I want to explore with this character. Yes, and Hephaestus can also be a fire god. Yeah, like Vulcan in Roman mythology. I mean, they're the same guy. Yeah, basically there's a lot of ways you can go about it, and obviously I also want to make something that is very easy for people to make OCs for, because I've talked about it in my first stream, the VOD, which can only be found on Twitch, mind you. So if you go on Twitch and go to my very first VOD, you'll see like a lot of the shit I talked about regarding like this sort of thing. But the idea that why RWBY and Harry Potter and even a lot of shonen manga are very successful is because they have these sort of things that make it very easy for you to make OCs for them or to engage with their world. Like whether it's to make fan fiction or to make your own original characters in them. So stuff like the power system. So like Avatar, you could make like a firebender and earthbender. You have factions, so like Game of Thrones, you have like houses, Lannister, Stark. Houses in Harry Potter, you have the Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs, Slytherins, and Ravenclaws. So elements of the world that make it easy for you to engage with and make OCs for. And RWBY obviously has quite a few of these, with like the fairy tale illusion. So obviously like RWBY is like Red Riding Hood, Vaishni is Snow White. So when you make OCs, obviously not everyone uses like a fairy tale illusion or a mythological thing, but I typically prefer to. So when I make an OC, I would like to connect them to a certain figure, like even my OC Gwyn, which is one of my RWBY OCs, which I later used in our spell is Steel. Oh god, what is that sound? No. Yeah, this character. So Gwyn was based on Nidhogg, and Nidhogg is a dragon from Norse mythology associated with corpses and decay, and Nidhogg is see you later, Kuro Tetsu. Thanks for all the comments. Yeah, maybe Nemesis can be darkness or metal. Yeah, I was thinking along those lines, associated with like steel, swords, because one of her symbols is a sword. But yeah, like Gwyn, my RWBY OC initially, she was based on this dragon from Norse mythology, which is actually my favorite Norse mythological character. I just think the idea of Nidhogg is very cool, which is why I always liked Gwyn as an OC, so I might actually recycle her again for this project as well, because she was a character in this. Like briefly, she was a RWBY OC, and then I recycled her for our spell is Steel, and now I'll probably recycle her again for Project 1, because obviously, you know, she's already has like a thing I could use, which is she was blessed by the dragon god Nidhogger. So that's obviously like basis for character. So why I say that is because obviously this is a solid bedrock for because obviously, you know, for fans of the setting, when once I start growing it and maybe making more content for it, for fans of it to just freely make their own characters, you know, then they can decide what kind of god would they be blessed by and how would that manifest into their powers. So for like, you know, because, you know, there's like an infinite number of like gods and mythological figures out there, so if you want to make an OC for it, all you have to do is basically give them like a kind of wizard aesthetic, like a robe of some sort, but then you can also mix like modern elements, whatever others, but as long as they have like a wizard robe and they have like a wand, but then that wand could be a normal wand, it could be a sword, it could be prosthetics, you know, what that wand looks like could be very different, and then what god they are blessed by. So, you know, it could be, you could make like a character who's god is like Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. It could be Anubis, the Egyptian god of death. It could be Tlaloc, and the Aztec god. It could be literally like, you know, like Guan Yu, the Chinese god of war. It could be literally anything you want, and then you can sort of match your character's aesthetic and powers according to like god. And then that obviously we're going into like stuff like the plot, like how, you know, the actual plot of what are the gods planning. Are they like at war with each other? You can sort of determine the relationships they have with certain factions, and that's kind of, I'm probably going to explore that next week, because this will be the last stream for this week. So we're going to pick it up next week again when I start working out probably more aspects of the world building, you know, like which gods are like good, like neutral to humans or friendly to humans, which ones are hostile for their own reasons, which ones are kind of known and unknown, that kind of thing. So we could probably, I could probably work that out either next week or after the stream, and that's sort of it, I think. So I think we've reached a good milestone here, and probably conclude there. Glad I managed to like discuss it with y'all, and I did have like, you know, kind of the models I wanted to use for the magic system already, but kind of talking about it on stream helped, and like reading your suggestions helped me sort of figure out how to sort of bring it all together. So let's see. Gwyn would be that one character you always see in the background for your projects. Yeah, I think at this rate it might be. But yeah, thank you all for coming. This ended up, yeah, so it's 2 hours and a half. That's pretty good. Set it up pretty well, and I'm gonna keep thinking about the setting. I think the more I talk about it and work on it, it sort of helps build my attachment to it, which in time hopefully I can sort of draw more stuff with, and if it works out, it could become like a more mainline project I could make stuff for on the channel, because obviously right now I'm sort of writing a novel for it, like not a novel, but just like writing scenes and scene ideas for it. And then obviously I'm thinking I might want to make it like a manga perhaps, because obviously I have a lot of, I'm very much picturing it like a shonen battle type story, but you know, that's neither here nor there, it's kind of far off. But we just kind of want to chill and have fun making the characters and working out more ideas about the world. So I thank you all for any of you who have watched and have been interested in this journey, even though you know it's not a whole lot of you, but the fact you know that you are interested, I'm grateful for. So thank you for coming, and next week we're gonna touch more on, you know, Project One. Hopefully eventually it'll get like a title. I do have a working title in mind, but we'll stick with Project One for now. So hey Zero Connect, we're just about to finish actually, so but thanks for coming, and thank you all for coming as well, and I will see you next week.